Welcome to the Final Ghost Podcast. I'm Anna, your podcast host, and although most of the time this feed is dedicated to horror film and TV history, occasionally I'm given the opportunity to chat to some of the most interesting filmmakers making horror today. Longlegs is arguably one of the most hyped about films of the year, if not the most hyped up horror film. Written and directed by Osgood Perkins, who also produced The Black Coat's Daughter and I Am the Pretty Little Thing That Lives in the House, both deeply interesting and singular takes on the genre, he now tackles the serial killer movie, which is perfect timing for me and this podcast personally because, as you'll know if you're a regular listener, we're currently in the middle of our serial killer deep dive. Longlegs stars Micah Monroe, she of It Follows fame, as a rookie FBI agent who gets assigned capturing the elusive, perverse serial killer known only as Longlegs, and played by none other than Nicolas Cage. Big evil vibes abound, and I genuinely think that the less you know about the film, the better viewing experience you'll have. The marketing for the film is very cryptic, and so am I. I did have the pleasure of chatting with writer-director Osgood Perkins about the film, and don't worry, this conversation is entirely spoiler-free. We talked about his taking inspiration from Silence of the Lambs, crafting characters, and his particular writing process, which was fascinating to hear about. After you watch the film, do let me know what you think of it. Slide into my DMs, they're fully open for Longlegs conversations. And I will be covering the film in depth on the Final Ghost Patreon, so you can listen to all of my thoughts over there. And with all that said, please enjoy my conversation with Longlegs director Osgood Perkins. So Osgood, thank you so much for your time. I'm a big fan of your earlier work as I was of Longlegs. I'm curious about, what about the serial killer genre or subgenre intrigued you, and what did you want to add to it with Longlegs?
So the idea, so I don't serial killers. I don't like it. I don't think about it. I don't watch true crime things. It's bothersome to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deeply negative, weird, scary, horrible thing. Um, the all I was trying to do was honor a great movie called Silence of the Lambs and use it as an invitation to the audience to sort of come into a place to take a seat in something that they understood already and already kind of felt comfortable with and felt safe in a weird way. There's a safety of something as wonderful as a movie like Silence of the Lambs, where you've seen it, you know it, you've experienced it, you love it, you kind of want to see it again for the first time. And so using the serial killer genre was honestly just a way to kind of come in the door. I don't think about it very much.
Mm-hmm.
It was just sort of an introduction to the audience to a world I wanted to go to.
I'm very much with you. Silence of the Lambs is a film that I watch at least once a year. And it does conjure up a sense of safety. So can you tell me a little bit about your own relationship with that film?
That was a movie that came out when I guess I was probably about 15 or 16 or so, sort of in that realm, and becoming interested in making movies, and was doing silly ones on the weekends with my friends and people in capes and masks and things, and then that movie shows up. And this was back in the day when you saw one commercial for a movie, maybe a trailer once, and you didn't know anything, and you had no expectation, and you go to the theater and you experience it. And there's a few movies, there's not a lot that are just working on every level perfectly and every time. And it was just this bath of just like, oh, everything is great, everything is surprising, everything is scary, everything is funny, it's sexy, it's weird, it's so compelling. And I think it was just kind of right place, right time. Everybody has their experience. For some people, it's like, they got to go to Shea Stadium to see the Beatles or something. But for me, I got to go to Universal Studios, move this theater at Universal City, and watch Silence of the Lambs. I think in the middle of the day, I think I saw like a daytime showing of it, no less.
Mm. And can you tell me then about Micah's character in the film, who is obviously a very clear parallel in so many ways to Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs. Do you see her, or did you conceive of her very much as a continuation of Clarice's character in that film, or do you see her sort of carry on the legacy of other detective figures from horror fiction and, the serial killer subgenre that become enmeshed with the killers that they're searching for?
Yeah, I think the enmeshed thing is sort of, there's a few imperatives that come with making a serial killer movie, and one of them is that the detective will invariably kind of become like the killer, at least, and there'll be some kind of mind meld. There'll be some kind of soul attachment that changes the detective more than it changes the serial killer. It doesn't usually change the serial killer much, but Brad Pitt is really changed by the Kevin Spacey character. But as far as Clarice Starling went, it's like I didn't want to match her up to Lee Harker in any way except for that she was a lady FBI agent who was given a job that she probably wasn't necessarily ready for, but that made her the perfect person. Beyond that, I kind of there's no other. Clarice Starling's very kind of A type, on top of it, and Lee Harker is very lost.
And you mentioned that, the psychic enmeshment with the killer that they're searching for is kind of one of the tropes that comes up very often in this sort of movies. What are the other ones that you either recognized watching films yourself, but also wanted to either make sure that they exist in Longlegs or to avoid them altogether?
Well, the best one of that kind of thing, of course, is Seven, where the just the idea that the killer has some, and this is fictional. This is a fictional thing. This is not true for
Totally.
real serial killers. But in
Mhm.
the fictional version of the serial killer, there's a certain poetry, there's a certain layered kind of textured trip that they're going on. They're not just killing people to get off. It's not an orgasm for them. It's for
Mhm.
for it, it's a bigger move. It's like an aria. It's like an epic poem to them, and especially clear in Seven, where it's all in one pack. It's like a song. It's like a
It's
movement.
like a whole performance piece.
It's a performance piece that has an
Yeah.
ending, that has
Hmm.
a ta-da. And so I feel like that quality of there's more to it than just this is how they get off, um, was
Mm.
was compel is just, obviously that just makes it more interest. That just makes it more, there's more to sink your teeth into.
Mm. That's always one of the things that's really compelled me about that subgenre. Actually, I'm talking not about true crime, but about fictional stories of killers and horror. And, one of the things that really struck me about Longlegs is how you achieve that through the creation of the atmosphere, but all of the different elements of the filmmaking that come together. It's not necessarily just the story itself. Can, can you tell me a little bit about what feeling you wanted to create in your audience with this film in particular?
It's funny. I've had to answer that a couple of times. I don't know what that is. Like I don't. It's a
Okay.
very. It's like it'd be like say that's like the realm of a doctor, right? I'll give you this
Hmm.
medicine and I hope it has this effect. For me, it's like for me the whole thing is just an exploration of something I'm thinking about, stuff that I'm interested in, things that have happened to me, processes of the mind and the heart and stuff, and sort of like wanting to include good taste and make something that I like and do something special. Like the
Mm.
intentionality is very much just to make something good. I know that sounds sort of soft, but it's what it is. And when you connect with the collaborators on that, and you sort of have the same taste and the same references. I mean, I was saying it to someone yesterday, like my DP and I, we didn't talk about horror movies. Like, what are we gonna like? Let's make it like this other like it never did we reference a horror picture. We talked about Gus Van Sant movies, right? We talked
Hmm.
about My Own Private Idaho. Like that was the movie that felt like the movie we were making to us, um, because it just, for whatever reasons, because we liked it. And at
Hmm.
some point, I think if you're going to be authoring stuff or do writing and directing things, or you're trying to put yourself forward, you have to just sort of do what you feel. It sounds really kind of corny, but you got to kind of just feel the thing. and try to make it the best you can. How someone's going to receive it, not not my problem. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Listen, I love that answer. And it's actually surprisingly not even the first time that Gus Van Sant has come up in an interview with the director of a very talked about horror film this year. So clearly Gus is in the air.
something.
But I wondered as well, is that sort of the reason that T-Rex, Mark Bolan, is so heavily included in the film? Is it
T-Rex
just somewhat?
T-Rex found their way into my space. They came on to, like if you think of your kind of your consciousness as being some kind of like a radio, right? You're kind of tuning in the dial, and some things are coming in really well and some things are slipping off, and sometimes you change it. And for me, that their stuff just came in at a certain time. I didn't know it. I wasn't a fan. It wasn't something I listened to when I was in high school. It
Mm,
was just something that I started to sort of get into my system as I was writing the movie. And it just kind of announced itself like a trumpet. And I felt at the time like I can either just say, yeah, okay, to that and see where it goes, or say, no, that's wrong.
mm,
But I think when you get the trumpet call from the universe and it says pay attention to something, it's more, why not? Just go down
mhm.
that river with it. And that's all that it was. And it turned out to really fit.
Is that also how Longlegs announced himself to you? Kind of, was there an element that came first or in a certain order? Was it the voice, the mannerisms, the pale mask-like face that
The
came to
voice, the
mind?
voice,
Was
the
it Nick
voice,
Cage?
the voice and mannerism and stuff is last. That's way down the
Interesting.
line. For me, when you're a writer and you're trying to write all the time and you're trying to push stuff out, a lot of things come out of you that don't immediately have a home. You kind of try to find, oh, well, like this character, this sort of a character who kind of comes to people's houses on their birthdays and they kind of interact with the kids, but they don't interact with the parents. And they're sort of like a clown or like someone who comes to the kid's birthday to perform, but they're sort of nervous and dirty and weird and sad. And they're something else they've got something in their car. And these things sort of start to take form and you try to put them in places and you try to, well, I think it's this. And then, when I got the inspiration to be like, oh, Silence of the Lambs, I should just kind of maybe that would be a good way in. I knew I needed a baddie, and I sort of had him sitting around, and then he fills himself in, and then if you're doing it right, they actually do. It's corny, it sounds corny, but they actually do
Mm.
start to write their own stuff, and the character comes in and sort of tells you what the thing is. And then you get Nicolas Cage way later, and then you start talking about voices way later, and he starts making voice
Mm.
recordings like that's months, that's year, that's a long time after.
That's so interesting. And I asked about the voice first because when I'm writing fiction stories, that's the thing that comes first to me. It's I hear the character speaking instead of seeing them. And I'm wondering, can you tell me a little bit more about this? When stories or images or characters start materializing in your head during your process, how do you keep them? Do you keep them it might be very pedestrian. Do you have like a post-it or a box, or do you keep them in a file, or do you sort of just let them marinate in your head until it's time for them to come out?
I write a lot. So I write big blocks of writing, big blocks of prose. I've never been a index card guy. I don't handwriting things is hard for me now. I don't really do that. So I sit and I type out big blocks of stuff. And I find that for screenwriting, that's the best approach because then when it comes time to make the pages, which is last, you're just taking things away, right? You're someone early on in my kind of education around screenwriting was like, have you ever noticed how much of a screenplay page is blank? It doesn't have anything on it, right? Like dialogue is in the front and middle, and there's a lot of white space. So that therefore sort of theoretically becomes you're taking language away. You're taking things, you're hiding things in the whiteness of the page. It sounds a little on the nose, but you know what I mean. So if I'm writing a 90-page script, I should have a 90-page outline because
Mm,
then I'll just pull of just prose because then I'll just pull the things out that I don't want to be overly obvious. Is that my own private
mm.
Idaho behind you?
It is actually.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a series I curated about films from the 90s, and that was
The,
one of the posters.
the best.
And I know we're running out of time, but I'm continuing to be curious about the process and considering that that's the way you write kind of in these blocks of text, which sound it's prose. Would you ever consider, or do you always think in images, or would you ever write or publish novels, novellas, short stories, prose
I,
text?
yeah, like, you write a lot of stuff. Like I've got novella pages. It's just, you got to earn money. I think that's what it comes down to. You just like,
Yeah.
if I'm gonna write a weird novella, like, yeah, maybe. But
Mm,
yeah, and my scripts are very prosy. They're very thick with a lot of stuff. I like to get everybody who's working on the movie kind of on the same page as soon as I
mm.
can. And the way to do that is to kind of over-inform the senses, I guess.
And before I wrap up, I have to ask about the whole occult and satanic vibe or atmosphere and background of the film. At what point did that start coming up? Is the satanic panic and that is that an interest of yours as a period of time, or did that emerge from the characters or from the ether
It's
of the ideas?
it becomes I like using Silence in the same way that I use Silence of the Lambs as a shorthand. You can use the devil as a shorthand because everybody brings with it their own kind of their own feeling about it, which is what's interesting in the first place. So when I say to you that people's reaction to the movie is none of my business, that's like me trying to be like, well, what do you think about? So some people think so many things about, let's say, the devil, that that's doing like a lot of the work for me. Do you know? I don't need to go and say, well, it's the devil. Let me tell you about what that is. Instead, it just becomes a color that you can use. Like it's like a primary color, and you use it, you put it whenever you want, and everybody kind of flows into it because they know what it means to them.
I love that. I absolutely love that as an idea, even as a sentence. Thank you so much for your
Great.
time.
My
I wish we
pleasure.
had more time.
Thanks for writing about the movie. I appreciate it.